Hey YouTubers, and welcome back to another Real Numbers podcast video. And like I said last week, this is going to be kind of a thing I do every single Monday. We're going to be talking about basically whatever I want to talk about in terms of, movie news, movie numbers, movie business, anything like that. Usually I'll be talking about myself, or I might rope in another YouTuber. That being said, we have a very, very special guest with us today. I will actually introduce him. I don't think he wants to introduce himself. Everyone, please give a warm welcome to Geekdom 101. What's up, man?
Yes, I would rather you introduce me. I would rather do that, I'm happy to be here talking about whatever you want me to talk about. Let's do it.
Yeah, guys. So today we're going to be talking about basically the future of the X-Men franchise at Fox, because we're not going to speculate right now whether Marvel's going to get them at any point. Personally, when you look at the numbers, especially the latest movies, not counting, I guess, X-Men Apocalypse, there's no way that Fox is giving up this franchise anytime soon. I'm pretty sure they're banking on it. And if release schedule, at least like potential release schedule, has anything to say about it, they're obviously going to be banking on it for the next couple of years in order to kind of basically make their extended universe, I guess you would say, as much as a crazy timeline and situation as the X-Men movies are. But basically, and I'm wondering, and I think like this is a very unique conversation when it comes to something like the X-Men, as opposed to where the series itself started and how the entire genre of the superhero genre, has actually grown up in the last 15 to 16, 18 years, whenever the next movie is. Personally, they started as ensemble pieces working around various characters and situations in order to tell big stories. And then they started around 2009 with, X-Men's Origins Wolverine, basically trying to do like solo movies, because at that point with, X2 and X-Men Last Stand, it was getting way too expensive in order to actually make these movies and actually to make them profitable. And it doesn't matter if they actually started making more money with each movie, just too much money to get everyone back. So let's do, I guess, individual characters, and that worked for that movie. It worked for the Wolverine. It worked for Deadpool and Logan.
Remember, we were supposed to get a Magneto movie. Remember, it was Wolverine first, Magneto second, and we never got that.
Yeah, and that was always an interesting thing. Although I feel like, didn't they, just on a side note, didn't they kind of take the Magneto movie and make that First Class, or at least I remember when First Class came out, everyone
said,
"Well, that."
Yeah, because the Magneto movie was rumored for like right around X2 era. Yeah, you might be right about that one. Yeah.
Well, no, I'm not necessarily sure I'm right, but I'm pretty sure even if it was they still had it on the books, or they still had issues with it, they wanted to do it. First Class basically destroyed that. I mean, that movie is centered solely around Charles Xavier and Magneto. I can't remember his real name. Michael Fassbender's character.
Eric Lesher.
Magnus. Magneto and Professor X. So personally, I'm wondering, just because of it, and it's interesting to me, like I was saying, considering how Marvel's kind of changed the game, and even how Warner Brothers with DC is trying to kind of get into the whole team up. Let's get to the ensemble. We want to see all these people teaming up. I'm wondering, is the future of this series in solo films instead of these big team up movies? Because look at what we've gotten, especially in the last year. Basically in the last year, we've gotten 3 X-Men movies, all of which very different degrees of quality.
I would agree.
Quality.
They're very inconsistent, if that's what you're trying to say.
Yeah, approach, quality, and just in general, like, fun movie going experience. And out of the 3, X-Men Apocalypse was, I guess, what is your opinion? I thought it was terrible.
When I first walked out of the theater, I liked it more than on repeat viewings. I don't know about terrible, but it certainly was, I would say, mediocre. There were things I liked about it, but it really was a huge, especially when you compare it to its predecessor, which may be, looking back, my favorite comic book movie of all time, or at least up there, which is Days of Futures Past. It was a huge step down, and there are things to like about the movie, but I don't know if terrible is the right word. Just mediocre, dude. It really was a step down. But again, when you first walk out the theater, it was one of those movies that it took a little while for it to actually, register.
And just so everyone knows, just like where that kind of, I guess, stands is Days of Future Past is actually the third highest grossing movie in that franchise, domestically at least, with $233 million, over $700 million worldwide. A very, very successful film in terms of this franchise. You don't necessarily
All
see
those movies made money, bro. Dude, even X-Men 3, which is universally hated, made a lot of money.
Oh no, yeah, that movie made a ton of money, but at the same time, I mean, back when less than $500 million was still really, really good as for a movie that cost just as much as that movie actually made. But still, it's just incredibly interesting to see how much money these movies do make in terms of the argument that we're trying to make here. And I agree with you. Days of Future Past, I have a hard time finding fault with that movie. I think it's good too, and I want to actually get into why I think that in terms of the whole ensemble cast and everything. Personally, when you have something like, I guess, Days of Future Past, one thing they did that retroactively even is they took basically the entire effort of the entire universe or the entire franchise as a whole and put all of it into one film the same way that the Avengers did. Now, a little bit more hamstrung together, but that's essentially what they did, taking the first three, the core cast of the first three films and putting them in with the new cast from First Class, and
it
also
was brilliant too with the time travel story.
Yeah, and bringing in Wolverine in a story that was big and flashy enough in order to kind of sustain that type of event style film. And you just couldn't necessarily, I guess, replicate it with someone like Apocalypse or the story that they try to tell in Apocalypse. And I feel like that's one of the reasons. I mean, like, look at the box office. Like, look how it kind of compared, especially. Now, I guess you can argue that Deadpool kind of took a lot of wind out of the sails for the X-Men franchise, but it was so kind of detached and devoid of anything even remotely related.
I don't even consider it, like, it's almost like a side, like a real side story, right? Like, it's such a, I don't consider it even a major part of Singer's vision even,
But do you think that's a bad thing?
No, because if Fox wants to establish a shared universe, you can't, I actually don't know who's in charge of the X-Men shared universe. I used to think it was Bryan Singer, but I guess he's not. Obviously we have Jeff Johns over at DC, and we have Kevin Feige over at Marvel. I think Amy Pascal was in charge, or may still be in charge, of the Spider-Man version of that. They work together. She was going to be in charge of the Ghostbusters shared universe before that went belly up.
Maybe not, considering recent reports, but we'll just have to wait and see.
It changes every month. But the thing is, I don't know who's in charge, but if they want to do a shared universe, then what can you do as a director? I mean, you have issues. We've heard stories of, the problems with Avengers 2 and Joss Whedon and how he didn't want to play ball. And what can you do? I mean, if they own the property, it's almost like these directors are getting hired to be, I hate to say it, but studio directors. However, that being said, Bryan Singer has done a fantastic job. I mean, yeah, okay, Apocalypse wasn't that great, but he did X2, he did Days, and then he also has other classics like Usual Suspects and At Pupil. I mean, the guy's got a tremendous resume. I think Superman Returns is a criminally underrated movie. I can't stand the hate it gets. The guy's a good director, and I think he does have a little bit more stroke, but really, what can you do? If they want to make a Deadpool movie with the money it made, what's your argument, What are you going to say?
And really, that's part of it. I agree. But the point I'm really trying to make here is Apocalypse was a step down when it came to, maybe, like I said, but Deadpool, like you said, it's kind of a little different,
I honestly don't think that Deadpool hurt. If the question you're asking me is, did Deadpool hurt Apocalypse? No, Apocalypse hurt Apocalypse, and I honestly feel that way. Yeah, no. Because just because Deadpool is a good movie, people want more good movies, dude. People aren't going to compare. I think honestly comparing Apocalypse to Deadpool, if you're out there and you're doing this, is kind of a naive thing to do because they're such a different movie. Like you said, ensemble cast, a different story, different rating, different time period. It's just a different movie. It might be in the same universe, but it's a different movie. It's like, let's look at, I'll give you another example. Let's use a different example. Look at Captain America Winter Soldier, a realistic espionage movie compared to the Star Wars sci-fi of Guardians of the Galaxy. Both are good movies, but they're so different. I don't think it's fair to compare them. Same universe. They're all going to be teaming up in Avengers, the next one. The Infinity Gauntlet or whatever they call it. I don't know if they might keep the name or not. You know what I mean? So it's like I don't think it's fair to compare just because they're in the same universe. I don't think it's fair.
Oh, and I agree. Personally, one thing I guess the one thing like I would have to say when you think about how I understand where you're coming from with that. Maybe the only thing I would imagine Deadpool doing is putting not just Deadpool but also Days of Future Past, making Apocalypse seem kind of like a sour taste after two amazing films, just a couple years off of each other, and then a couple months after Deadpool you see something and it's not up to par with what you've seen previously. And also, like you said, Civil War was just a couple weeks before Apocalypse, which is probably what really hurt it, when you too much saturation in terms of the superhero genre. And then a couple weeks after Apocalypse you had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows opening as well. So
yeah, it's getting crazy, bro.
It really is. It's getting kind of crazy. So maybe that's what really kind of hurt it. But at the same time,
but at the same time, wasn't that good of a movie? I mean,
no,
really,
yeah, I agree. I agree.
It didn't emotionally hit you like Days did.
And that's the thing, and what I was trying to get at earlier is I feel like when you look at how successful Days of Future Past was in relation to the other X-Men movies, especially at the time, the only thing it basically bowed down to was The Last Stand. But you got it's like a time and place thing. In 2006, when The Last Stand actually opened, it was coming off of tremendous goodwill from X-Men and X2, especially X2, right. which is still to this day considered a masterpiece from a lot of people who are very diehard fans of the superhero genre. Yeah,
great movie. Yeah, and it really changed. If you really look at X-Men 2 and Spider-Man, from that era, we could talk about this in a different video, but X-Men 2 kind of changed the game because X-Men 2 had a cliffhanger ending, which a lot of these movies didn't have. And it also, if you remember, comic book movies like X-Men 1 and Spider-Man 1 had very short run times. X-Men 2 was longer, like twice as long. And that's when we started to see that whole, okay, we can make these movies longer. And that's when nowadays we have Captain America and Avengers films that are close to 3 hours because of that. Like, people have realized that,
Mm-hmm. And
so I'm just saying.
And that's another video as well, like how that's helpful but also hurtful when it comes to box office success. And if you don't know much about it, it's very fascinating, but I won't get into it here. Personally, when you look at it though, like Days of Future Past was the culmination of all of this stuff that they've been building up.
That's right.
It felt like a classic coming together. Like I said, big concept. Big cast, just felt like everything had paid off. And I think it's a classic, excuses, they feel like they kind of took it too far too quickly in this trilogy. It would have worked really well, even probably better, if it was the second or the third film in this franchise, in Apocalypse. They could figure out a way to make Apocalypse the second film. I don't necessarily know how that would work given the story they told, but Apocalypse felt like a step down because there was no build-up. I mean, they didn't bring back Patrick Stewart, Ian McKellen. They barely brought back Hugh Jackman for a 20-minute side story that just ultimately amounted to nothing, to basically just check off the box to have Wolverine in the fucking film. Excuse my language. And
well, you're right. I mean, it's hard to argue that.
It's hard to argue, and I think that's their big problem and one of the big problems that X-Men has had and going to continue to have if they continue to make this mistake. And why, with the recent success of Deadpool and Logan, especially considering there are films, typically ones that Hollywood wouldn't necessarily consider or would consider incredibly risky, one of the things they need to do is start focusing on small character-centric stories eventually leading up to something, or at least something else, instead of focusing on these big ensemble casts with characters that we're not necessarily familiar with, actors that we're not necessarily familiar with, and situations that we're not necessarily familiar with, and trying to sell that as one big movie. It doesn't work in today's environment. Marvel changed the game, for better or worse, that they learn that people are willing to sit through 4 or 5 movies in order to get to the real hefty story later down the road. And X-Men, the way they've kind of taken the entire series, all 6, X-Men movies, X2, Last Stand, and then the other ones, you don't necessarily meet that criteria. You shove a lot of different people into one movie, and you expect it to work as an ensemble piece, but then you're left scratching your head at the end. That's not to say that most of them aren't fun-loving movies. There's a couple of bad ones in between, but they're good. That being said, like with the recent success, like I said, I feel like they should really, really start considering actually doing solo projects that lead into big movies instead of just focusing on just legitimate X-Men movies.
Yeah, no, and you're right. It's a different mentality, and people get confused because they think that that Marvel and Fox are doing the same thing when really they're not. You've got your X-Men movies coming out in addition to your Deadpools and your Logans, so they have 2 or 3 different shared universes or shared universe movies. Then you've also got the upcoming films that are rumored. We don't actually. I'm at the point right now, bro, where I'll believe it when I see it. The X-Force movie. So it's interesting, right? So we're going to get Cable and Deadpool 2. And, of course, Cable leads X-Force. So we're going to get Cable and then X-Force. But the thing is, when it comes to X-Force and when it comes to Cable, I think Cable is a very well-known, popular character. However, X-Force, I don't think is that well-known of a team. And the thing is, I think one of the reasons why Days worked out better than Apocalypse is because you had that familiarity of the cast. See, the thing is, same thing with Logan. People grew up, or, when they were younger, they saw Patrick Stewart, Famke Janssen, I can never pronounce her name right. That's the X-Men cast that we grew up with in the original movies. And Days, and of course Hugh Jackman, and Days did the same thing. And I think that with a movie like First Class, even though I absolutely love James McAvoy, I mean, dude, James McAvoy and Split, that's to me, that's Academy Award level what he did in that movie. Like this dude, Michael Fassbender and James McAvoy are I'm a huge fan of those two guys. And Jennifer Lawrence, I like her. I think she was overpushed in these last 2 X-Men movies a little bit, but I like her a lot. You know what I mean? But I don't think that I love them, and I think those 3 characters are I guess enough. But the new X-Men they introduced in Apocalypse, the new Jean Grey, the new Cyclops, the new Nightcrawler, the new Storm, it's not Halle Berry. It's not the originals, and I do think it turns people off a little bit. I'm not saying they should use the same actors, and I'm not saying I agree with that mentality, but I can see why somebody would gravitate more towards the faces that we're familiar with versus the ones that we're not. See what I'm saying? If that makes sense. Like Star Wars Force Awakens, I mean, we got to be real on this one. Let's use that as an example. If they made that Force Awakens movie and it was in the distant future to where there's no connection with the original trilogy, if they didn't have the Luke Skywalker, Mark Hamill, Carrie Fisher, Harrison Ford, if they were not in that movie, I assure you that movie would not be as successful. They had to use the classic characters. And that's the trick to creating a new universe, is you use the classic characters to get your new characters over, and then you segue into the next generation without relying on nostalgia at every single time. Dragon Ball Super. Every single time. Right? But the thing is, it's hard to do that sometimes, and we have an example of Force Awakens doing it the right way, because we actually care about Rey, Finn, Poe, and Kylo. Most of us do. Whereas with Star Wars, people don't give a damn about the Jean Grey being Phoenix again. Most people just didn't care. And I think I'm not going to compare Bryan Singer to J.J. Abrams because, honestly, my opinion, Bryan Singer, even though I love J.J., I think Singer is a better storyteller than J.J. Abrams, in my opinion. But, hey, we're all humans and we can't always have a hit, dude. I mean, dude, Bonfire of the Vanities exists for a reason. There's a reference. There's a film. That's a film nerd reference, bro. If you get that joke, bro,
Exactly.
I don't know if anybody's gonna understand that joke, bro.
Probably not. Well, maybe the people watching this. I'm not expecting a huge audience to watch this, but I mean,
if you're a huge movie nerd, dude,
Exactly. Look, I completely understand. I think I agree with you. I feel like Bryan Singer.
Sorry, De Palma.
Not my favorite director, but at the same time, better than J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams
Dude, Usual Suspects by itself is hard to it's hard to argue that, dude. That one movie kind of puts you on a different level, you know.
Yeah, and it's a masterclass work, honestly, and I really do appreciate it. But like, not to get way too off topic, but just so we were mentioning it, my biggest problem with JJ really is his insistence that the mystery box be a thing.
And he's been doing it now with Westwood. And the problem is that they're not paying off the storylines. Like, we talked about this off air, but we haven't talked about it on air. They're not paying off the storylines in Westwood the way that you would think that they should. And it's him and the Nolans. And the Nolans are also notorious for keeping things a secret and twists and things like that. But the problem is that with Star Wars, for example, you can't always look, real talk. I'm going to go see episode 8. It's going to be awesome. But I assure you, there will be a group of people who are going to be let down because Snoke is not who they thought it was. Rey's not who they thought it was. So when you have that mystery box, it can work out for you if you give them a good payoff. But the problem is that not everybody's going to be happy with the payoff. I don't know if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, and I completely agree. And it is part of that stuff. You're putting your eggs in too many baskets because you don't want to actually tell the full story. You'd rather kind of leave mystery open. But at the same time, you have... This is completely off topic. You have too many years.
It's still on topic. We're comparing JJ to Singer.
Yeah. So like, you have too many years for people in the internet being what it is will come up with a billion different theories about one thing, and then people will get their heart set on something that makes complete sense to them, and it's not going to be that way. And you get disappointed. You can't see why they didn't do your brilliant idea or something. But that's just. That is what it is. When it comes to X-Men, when it comes to Bryan Singer, like, I agree with you. I completely agree with you. One thing they tried to do, I guess, it's interesting. I think maybe they made a mistake, I guess, in their business sense. They made a mistake thinking that James McAvoy and Fassbender were actually the big drawing points of X-Men after a while. Or at least something, them and Lawrence, because, Lawrence is Hunger Games. People want to see Jennifer Lawrence.
They really pushed her, though. But they overdid it, I think, with Apocalypse.
They did it. And they thought that those people were the draws of the franchise when it really... And it seems hard in retrospect, but even going into it as a fan, as someone who watches this stuff, both entertainment-wise for the movies, but also the numbers, it feels really hard to imagine that these big movie studios, especially like Fox, who spend millions of dollars into getting this right and marketing and understanding their audiences, would go in and thinking that you can introduce these new people based off old characters who we already associate with other actors, with these characters that have been around for, First Class, which is still the second least grossing movie of all the X-Men movies. And then Days of Future Past, which told such a big, complete story utilizing almost everything that they had created thus far. And thinking that the characters in First Class were the drawing point enough to make these other actors in these new role, or these old roles with these new actors remotely interesting. It just seems like such a strange concept to me in terms of actual, filmmaking is an art, but it's also a business. It seems like a strange business move. And
yeah.
And obviously it shows.
Again, they're trying to... I get the mentality behind it, but it just didn't work to the degree they wanted it to work. Like, people want to see... they want to see Hugh Jackman. They want to see Patrick Stewart more than they do McAvoy and Fassbender. Now, I'm not... Again, I really like those guys. Please don't think I'm discrediting their acting skills, because those guys can act. Just watch Days of Futures Past. They carried that movie. They carried that freaking movie, It's just, I don't know if people were ready to accept it. Plus, dude, let's keep it real, bro. The issues with Apocalypse was beyond their... Even if they nailed a freaking Academy Award performance, they couldn't fix it. Look, I love Oscar Isaac. That's another great actor. He's a Latino brother. He's not Apocalypse, bro. Like, he tried his best. It just... The story was bad. They tried to introduce, Psylocke and these new kids. They introduced... That's another mistake they made in Apocalypse. They introduced too many new characters and too many new old characters. Like, they brought back Storm. They had Jubilee. They had, Cyclops, Jean Grey. It's too much. It really is too much for one movie, even though I like the idea of an ensemble, because the X-Men in the comics are the X-Men, bro. It's too much. And I'll be honest with you, Mark. I'll be honest with you. I have reservations about how Avengers is going to turn out because the big scuttlebutt is that the Avengers, the second one, the final one coming up in 2020, is going to have everybody in it.
Yeah.
Are they going to be able to give appropriate screen time to every character? The answer is no. It's just not going to happen because there's not enough time. The comics can do it because you have pages upon pages upon pages, but movies can't last 4 or 5 hours, bro. As much as Mike from Laughing Stock Media wish they would, it's not going to happen, right? So people are either going to die or who knows.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I mean, yeah, just to bring that up, Marvel has said, like, yeah, maybe 50 people, and people speculate, okay, like villains and heroes, we can make 50 work, just utilizing everyone. It's just like, so
it's
you're just
gonna
gonna
be
have
very
people,
challenging.
You're gonna have people running around in the background. Also, a fun movie box office, or at least business-wise news about that is they were reporting that I guess Avengers 3 and 4 together is going to cost $1 billion, which is significant considering the Hobbit trilogy.
They'll make it back.
Oh no, they will. They'll make it back with the first film. But considering the Hobbit trilogy is the single highest grossing, I guess, single production, I guess you could say.
You mean like it was all shot at once type thing?
Yeah, single production the same way. I mean, you kind of.
Well, we know the best one ever is Back to the Future, but that's my opinion.
and you have so like you have that, and you start thinking one way or the other that $1 billion over 2 films, 500 million each. Then you got to imagine. You have to imagine marketing and stuff. It's going to cost them a lot of money. So, but just getting back to the point, I completely agree with you. It's just you have too much you're trying to do in one singular story. When at the same time, like you were saying, in probably the future, if they're smart, if they're absolutely smart, they're going to start thinking about maybe doing this, where taking a popular character like Deadpool, maybe allowing Wolverine to. After Logan, after the brilliant reception that film had, as good as that movie is, you have a chance to let Logan rest a little bit, maybe even use X-23's character, but you introduce Cable.
I think Deadpool will carry this the Fox universe. I totally agree Deadpool will, until Cable comes in, but I don't know if Cable can carry it by himself.
But that's the thing, and I think that this is why they're really smart about it, and why I do believe that, I think it's Supernova, X-Men Supernova is the next one. I really think they need to...
Is that confirmed? That sounds like fan fiction. X-Men Supernova?
I think so. Like, I think they're really wanting to do the Supernova.
I'm on Screen Rant's website, which again, I have an opinion about Screen Rant, and they're saying that no, it's not called Supernova, but it's gonna be about the Dark Phoenix, pretty much.
Yeah.
So again, this is probably, I don't agree with this, because they're doing is they're kind of doing another version of X3, The Last Stand. I don't know if that's a good idea to retell that story. I don't know, man. In the same universe,
they're rushing into it, man. That's the problem. Like to me, that's the big problem. They're rushing into it too quickly, and like I said, stories
they're gonna do it
need big
differently.
build-up. Yeah, I agree, but like big stories need big build-up. We need to actually care about the characters. When X2 ended and you got that little tease that they were going to be doing it in the next film, it felt like something, because X-Men was better than everyone thought it would be, and then X2 was better than most people thought anything could be. So it felt like it was going to be kind of worth it, and it was building up to something. And then apparently, Last Stand kind of pissed off everyone, kind of disappointed everyone. But getting back to the Deadpool thing, I think if they end up doing this, it would be kind of smart, and they have talked about it a little bit recently, saying that, Deadpool, we're going to introduce Cable, and then we're doing X-Force, and then we're going to kind of be taking a step back and letting Deadpool 3 be something a little on its own, a little bit more independent of everything else going on, but still very much living in the same universe. And I feel like that's what they really need to do. They need to start introducing characters, and Deadpool was such a big success that potentially you can actually have it carry, like you said, the entire universe for what it's worth, with Ryan Reynolds being the new, baby face, as much as weird as that is to say for his character, but yeah, like the face of the franchise. And it's going to be interesting to see. But another thing I wanted to talk about this, just get your general opinion on it, is what do you think, or just really, really far out expectation, speculation about Deadpool 2's success? personally, I don't think that Fox is going to be able to replicate it. I know Ryan Reynolds is very charismatic. He is the incarnation of Deadpool. I've been saying that ever since Origins came out. He embodies the character so well.
Yeah, he's good.
But
perfect.
He's perfect, and he really lives that character. He engages with fans as it and all this other stuff. But Deadpool is basically a once-in-a-lifetime type of film in terms of success, in terms of box office numbers. Nowhere should it have made as much money as it did. And look, and I know people have their opinions. I didn't think Deadpool was a type of film that deserved to make over $350 million.
Because it was so different what it is, bro.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
I agree.
And it was fun. And it was also fun. It was very funny. I mean, I agree with you. The story has problems. I said that in my review over a year ago. The story is pretty... The story in Deadpool 1 is extremely by the numbers. I mean, like, it's really by the numbers. But it's so different and so fun. And the character is so over that's why it worked. And Deadpool 2, I think, will be a success. The question is, can they carry it over to Deadpool 3? Because the Deadpool 2 storyline has to put the character in more adversity. And because he's almost immortal, it's going to be hard to do that. You know, same thing with Superman movies. Like, Superman 1 and 2 were great, but then 3 kind of, wasn't so great. And that's the thing is you notice that, like, 2 can build on the momentum of 1. But 3, if you notice that whenever a franchise hits that third number, a lot of times it becomes harder to create a good story because you're having, those same issues. Plus, if they make it so... Now, what they could do is they have Deadpool 2, and instead of having a self-contained story, you have Deadpool 2 end in a cliffhanger to where, like, one where Deadpool is actually in trouble, then you wrap it up with Deadpool 3. That's a way out of it. But I have a feeling they're going to make it a self-contained story where at the end it's a happy ending, and I don't know if that's the right way to do it. But I will say this. One thing that people always, I think, forget is the secret to having a high-budget movie is replayability. People have to go back to the movie theater over and over again to make a movie. The reason why Force Awakens made so much money is because people saw that movie 3, 4, 5 times. Mm-hmm. Jurassic World kind of got lucky because even though Jurassic World...
I completely agree with you. And
it was all based on timing because, look, even though Jurassic World was, it was the first Jurassic Park in years, right? Maybe, 15 years?
Since 2003.
Yeah, and not just that, it was also the first, it was also, I guess, a soft reboot. I don't even know what you call it. But the thing is, it came out, I think, the week before Father's Day. So, and what happened was there was no other movies like it around, and as you know, many fathers were kids when Jurassic Park came out. So that's really what helped. And you can look at the numbers and look at how big it was on Father's Day. So the film had replayability, and it got a big audience on Father's Day because people go to the movies on Father's Day. So it did very well. Now, will Jurassic World 2 do as well? That's one where I think it probably won't. But it all depends on timing, and the problem is, like you talked about earlier in our discussion, if Deadpool 2 comes out in the midst of heavy competition, like I don't know the release date of it, but if it comes out when all these other movies are coming out, it may end up suffering. But I think it is still going to be successful because of how popular They're very smart, bro. That trailer before Logan was brilliant. They know what they're doing when it comes to Deadpool. They really do.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and I completely agree. And the only reason I necessarily, I guess, bring it up to any real degree is Deadpool to me is really a one-note character, especially the way they portrayed him in that film.
That's why it's very challenging to write the sequels. I'm not saying that it's not challenging. This is going to be hard.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like that's one of the things they really need to kind of... I hope they're worried about it. And, from what we read, the one thing I really have to give it to them, not just Ryan Reynolds, but it does seem like the creative team is incredibly passionate about bringing in the best possible, I guess, product that they can, honestly. And it's going to be interesting to see how they pull it off. In your terms, like, one thing I would like to see is if Deadpool 2 comes out, I would like to see it lead into X-Force and then X-Force lead back into Deadpool 3 to make it tangibly connected, but at the same
I'd be
time,
okay with that.
you run into problems either way. And personally, I just don't think, like, I feel like it's a lightning in a bottle type of thing. Like, lightning won't strike twice for Deadpool. Will it be a
Yeah, but dude,
success? Will it be
Deadpool's still super. He's too popular, bro. That's the problem. He's too popular.
No, yeah. Like, will it be a success? Yes. Will it make over $200 million, $250 million? Yes. Probably be the second highest grossing. It will probably be the second highest grossing film from the X-Men franchise, even when it comes out, even if other films come out before it, just because of how popular he is. But at the same time, grossing another 700 million in the box office, I don't necessarily see that happening unless with foreign markets becoming ever more popular, maybe they bring it up. But domestically, I just see it falling just because of how I think people, maybe if, like you said, Deadpool 2 might be a big success, but people might start to see how tiresome this character can actually become by the time we get to X-Force or X-Men or Deadpool 3. And that's going to be their big challenge when it comes to this type of character. Not to mention not to mention Fox's, I guess, problem with having to recast someone like Wolverine after all this time. Hopefully they don't. Hopefully they decide that maybe they can kind of rely on X-23 and all that going into the future. And this isn't, any of this is not even to mention the kind of long in development Channing Tatum Gambit movie, which
that's never gonna happen, bro.
Which will never happen. But
that's like Black Adam, bro. Black Adam ain't never gonna happen, bro. That movie's never coming out. Come on, I don't care all the Rocks, and I don't care what the Rock says. That movie's never coming out.
That movie's never coming out. The same way that the Rock was going to be Johnny Bravo. I'm still waiting for that movie.
Oh, come on. That's gonna be where Magneto. Where's Magneto at, bro? We talked about that already. Where's that Magneto movie at, bro?
Just to wrap up, I really do personally believe that I really do personally.
What? What a brain fart!
I know.
What?
I really do personally believe that X-Men really needs to start focusing on character-centric films, these spin-off films, really interesting character movies, and then leading into big movies like Days of Future Past. And really, it might seem like that's kind of by the numbers with Marvel standards today, but they've kind of put themselves in. This franchise has been along for so long. They have enough kind of groundwork that it will start to feel more natural quicker than something like DC's universe or the upcoming Universal Monsters universe or the Godzilla and King Kong universe or something. They have a solid foundation. Now they just have to work with it, and they can't keep doing these X-Men movies, these huge ensemble pieces, just so they can have their by the numbers big budget blockbuster X-Men movie coming out every couple of years that is going to be remotely satisfying, if not completely terrible. So that's just my opinion. What about yours?
But also, you have to also remember they have a much smaller talent pool, because the MCU has way more characters than Fox's X-Men does. You know what I mean? So how many characters can really carry their own movie?
It's true, but it depends. It all depends on the story, right? Like, you can tell smaller size stories. That's the lesson they learned. They should have learned from Deadpool, not make everything R. Is we could spend $58 million telling a very small story based around a remotely interesting character, and people might gravitate towards it if we sell it right, not necessarily
it's
this
gonna be
character.
Hard, man. It is.
I
there's a lot of competition. You know what I mean?
I completely agree, and it's going to be hard for them. But look, X-Men's been around for a long time. X-Men has a lot of good characters, stories. I mean, they have a lot of interesting characters, like you said.
Yeah,
Magneto,
but most of them
Gambit,
are ensemble. But most of them are ensemble, though. Like, all the big X-Men storylines, from Days of Futures Past to the Phalanx Covenant to Fatal Attractions, they're all ensemble stories. That's the problem, is that I see where you're coming from, but I'm saying they're kind of stuck in a hole here, in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be interesting. And honestly, the future of their success is going to be how they juggle this. But I really do think that's their big problem going into the next couple years, especially the competition, not only with other superhero movies, but other expanding cinematic universes, as much as anyone wants to try. So they have, like I said, they have a good ground. They have the pavement down. They just need to figure out how to do it. Not gonna be easy.
Well, they just can't make crap movies like Apocalypse for us. That's what they gotta avoid doing.
That's what they really, yeah. We don't need any more movies like that. You've given us enough of that.
It's like, I really don't hate that movie, but I will say the more I think about it, the more I get angry at the movie. Like, I'm not gonna lie, I don't hate it, but it's one of those movies, you know what I mean? You get more and more mad. It's like the Matrix sequels. Like, when you first see them, you don't really hate them, and then as time goes by, you hate them, and then after more time goes by, you're like, you know what? I appreciate this, this, and this. And then it's like, you know what? They still suck. But you know what? They did this right. But, you know, so you're just going back and forth on this. It's one of those movies. You know?
It is one of those movies, but it's not a complete train wreck like Fantastic Four. So I guess we can all agree that that's okay.
That's finished.
That's done. Anyway, guys, I think we're gonna leave it at that. I hope you did enjoy this if you listened this long. But honestly, I enjoyed it. I really like these videos, and hopefully we can get Geekdom over here again just to talk about this stuff with us, because I enjoyed it. But anyway, do you have anything left to say, man?
No, man. This was fun. We should do it again sometime.
Oh, we definitely will. Every Monday. Anyway, guys, we're going to catch you on the next video. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, share this video out to all your friends if you really liked what you heard here. Share your opinions and everything. We'll catch you on the next video. Bye.
Bye.